Hey everyone, for anyone who doesn't know who I am a top 5 Slay the Spire 1 player. So going into Slay the Spire 2, I feel pretty confident that I have a good grasp on these characters and some of the dominant strategies that you might want to be using, at least on the release patch. So I wanted to go ahead and put together a guide on Silent, who I think I spent the second most amount of time with in the game, and let you guys know what I think is good, and maybe how to think about the character in the current ecosystem of the game. Going forward, I definitely wanted to put together all the tier lists for the characters and get people started in the game that maybe don't have any experience, or maybe just help some people that are trying to grind max Ascension and try to string together some win streaks. So I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll see you all in the next one. I will explain the slime mechanic. So this keyword I think is one of the only new keywords on the character, if not the only one, but essentially when you discard it, it plays. So notably something like Tactician, as like an old card in Spire 1, you would have to discard and it's unplayable. But Sly cards can be played for their cost. So, for example, Abrasive here, I can discard it by playing acro onto it, discard it, it will cast for free, but it does count against card plays. So, for example, if you have Pocket Watch, acro discarding Abrasive would count as 2 card plays, which is meaningful and something to think about, just an interaction that you have to be aware of. Okay. We'll just go ahead and get started. So Abrasive, I don't think is insanely good, but it is a card you can discard for free and activate and get into play relatively easily. And the break point of having 1 dex in this game seems to be pretty meaningful. I think every time I get Oddly Smoothstone, I'm pretty happy. And I seem to just not really take a whole lot of damage from that point onwards. There's not a whole lot of ways that you're going to be scaling block or need to scale block even, because most enemies just simply don't hit that hard. So if you have one thing like this, just a little bit of a boost, then it can kind of stop you from taking chip damage for the rest of the run. And honestly, playing up free power is like pretty decent. I don't think it's like the most important thing to be getting into play, but it's good enough. I think the main thing that holds it back is that you're seeing it against other rares most of the time, more often than not. Okay. Gonna throw Accelerant in D. This mostly is just due to the fact of how polarizing Slay the Spire 2 Silent is currently. We could be wrong, but I think Silent is by far the strongest character. And most of this has to do with how strong the discard package is in this game. Part of this is the cards themselves being really strong, but a large part of it is also the fact that there's a lot of ways to just remove your entire deck. A lot of the ancient boons just say exhaust all your defense, exhaust all your strikes and defense, remove 4 cards, remove 5 cards, upgrade everything. Like the infinite style deck that just needs upgrades on key cards and removes to win the run just got a lot. It doesn't need a whole lot of energy because you're not really even needing to play powers. Especially now because the energy cheating is so absurd on these Sly cards. You get so much output just from having your combo pieces line up. And in general in this game, it feels like every character has sort of been pulled into archetypes harder than in Spire 1. So as an example, right, you sort of need acro to line up with like a Tactician for that card to be pretty good. I think Silent in general has the easiest time lining up those sorts of combos compared to something like Regent, which also needs star gain and star payoff. And Ironclad has this like whole Vuln package that wants to have a lot of Vuln on the enemy, but is like a really hard time actually drawing the cards in the correct order. If your deck is really small, it means that oftentimes your combo will line up, and Silent just has the easiest time actually putting those cards into the deck and making the combos happen. So not saying you never pick poison. This is kind of the catalyst for placement in this game. One thing to be aware of, I think, with this is that fumes and this are kind of a non-bow. Your fumes will just never really actually tick up. You're kind of just getting like 5 damage a turn, which is fine. But this does tick down your poison once it triggers. So unless you're actually having multiple poison cards, which I would advise against, for the most part, you only want like 1 or 2, and those are the good ones. We'll get to it. You probably just don't want this in the deck very often. If you transform into it, well, it's a free remove, and that's good enough. I play the Slimed in my deck, and then I go infinite with all the discard package. Okay. Accuracy. just going to throw right in the middle of the pack here. I don't think, and again, this is part of the problem with this combo-oriented style that the game design seems to be moving in. In the old game, Blade Dance didn't exhaust, and Blade Dance is just a very solid card that lets you pick accuracy after it's in the deck. There are nuances, and like we would pick accuracy sometimes before Blade Dance is in the deck, and it was fine. But for the most part, you pick accuracy after you have Shiv cards to take advantage of it. In this game, it's way more draw order reliant because Blade Dance exhausts. So you can't just cycle one Blade Dance and have accuracy and have that be a damage solve in a long fight. If you draw the Blade Dance first and want to play it, early on, the accuracy is just a complete break. And I think that's what's really hurting this. Blade Dance has always been like the best Shiv card. And there's new replacements, but for the most part, I think Blade Dance being the best Shiv card has not really changed. And that just hurts accuracy's strength. I think in the old game, this is just going to be a lot better. Unfortunately, Shivs are just a little bit worse in this game, just because having commons that let you bridge into an archetype is kind of how you end up getting a deck that takes advantage of these cards in the first place. And without the bridge card, all the payoffs suffer. Okay. Speaking of which, acro lines up all your combos in this archetype. It's just better than it was in Slay the Spire 1. I think in Slay the Spire 1, I had this here in like my final rankings. But having more discard payoffs, having this be one of the premium ways to discard cards and draw cards, especially since Calc Gamble has been made to exhaust permanently, and you cannot remove the exhaust by upgrading. The other cards that do similar functions to enabling discard packages just move up. I don't think I have to explain a whole lot. We can talk about the discard payoffs when we get to it. Adrenaline, very, very easily S tier here. Free acceleration, just always going to be good. I will say that this card is not an output solve. It helps you do what your deck is always already trying to do. So if you're seeing this up against other rares that actually do solve your output, you might need to consider that first. Oftentimes, if the deck is good and already functioning and you just want to line up your combo, this is just an extra card in your hand, extra energy to help play your draw cards and to get your cards lining up together. And that's kind of what every character is turned into, as previously mentioned. After image, again, I don't know where this necessarily goes. We'll put it here for now. I think it's less needed than in the first game. Cards that slow you down and don't let you go infinite on turn 1, which is very reasonable now, kind of stop you. Like there's a lot of enemies that kind of stop you from actually playing infinite by just adding a bunch of statuses to your deck. And Silent is one of the only characters that does not have targeted exhaust to get rid of those statuses. So I think if you are going the super small deck thing, you sort of want your deck to just go off on turn 1. And it's pretty reasonable to expect that. I think a lot of runs, you can actually make your deck just win on turn 1. Or play through the statuses. But I think After Image is just not as needed anymore. It's obviously still a lot of output, but it's not really doing what you need from your cards in this game. And as Act 4 gets added, maybe that will change. Deck building will change as enemy balance changes. Who knows? Right now, it doesn't feel like the enemies really hit that hard early on into the fight, so you're better off playing your powers that sort of win the fight instead of let you block throughout the fight. Okay. Anticipate. I haven't played with this card a ton. Just off of theory, having 0 energy, like more output on a character that wants to be slamming all the draw cards is pretty okay. However, I do think that any card you're adding needs to serve a very good function when your whole kit is trying to draw combos together. If you're playing acro and you're drawing to anticipate, would you have rather just drawn into your reflex or drawn into your gamble or drawn into your tactician instead? Very likely. So I think there's a use for this, just like maybe in the early game, if you haven't seen this stuff yet, you can pick this and it does something. It's just energy cheating. And that's one of the main restrictions in this game so far, is that all the characters are a little bit more limited on energy just because you don't have boss relics that provide energy very often. So you need to find some sort of way to get more output. This is maybe a way to do it, but I don't love this temporary stuff that needs to be drawn alongside other cards. adding this to the deck sort of stops it from being drawn alongside your other stuff more often. If you're trying to do too many combo things all at the same time, you're just pulling yourself in too many directions and stopping your combos from actually working. So I don't know that I love this thing. I think it's pickable, but it's definitely not amazing, at least not from what I've experienced so far. Okay. Assassinate. This is sort of just Giga Backstab. Applies Vuln, strips Artifact, Exhaust gets out of the way. Obviously extremely solid card, but I think the fact that you're oftentimes seeing this up against like something like Adrenaline, because you're seeing it at the boss reward screen, makes it a little bit lower. If you see this early game, this is like probably one of the best things you can possibly see, but it's just fine. I mean, I think like thinking of this as like really good backstab probably makes it clear what it does. But again, the fact that it's rare sort of hampers that a little bit. Okay. This might feel a little controversial. I think some people probably think this card is like one of the better cards in the kit. I don't think backflip is really what you want. Most of the time, if you're paying 1 energy to draw, you'd rather it come stapled alongside discard. And maybe this will make more sense when we see some of the card packages later on. But being able to draw more with acro and discard the card triggers a lot more stuff than just drawing backflip to try and draw into your thing that actually does the discard. You're basically introducing another piece to draw into like your prepared to trigger your tactician or reflex or whatever, instead of just having less cards in the deck and drawing your prepared in the first place. Playing the 1 energy cost is just not super great, and honestly, unless you're doing some footwork thing and blocking a lot with decks, then probably you don't need this. I think something like backflip with footwork is probably going to be better if you're playing something that relies more on like fumes and sitting there and blocking and incidental damage, and you're not really able to win fights super quickly. But I think with the way the character feels now, you can often play to just sort of win the fight on turn 1, and that's not really doing it. You want to be playing your powers, you want to be playing the acro, and maybe you're just going off and killing enemies like immediately in turn 1. I don't think backflip is really contributing to this idea. Okay. Backstab, just talked about this. Really good front load damage. Act 1 is probably the most scary thing for all of the characters so far. I think Act 3 is relatively tame, and the boss gauntlet's relatively tame. If you make it through Act 1 and early Act 2, you're probably going to win the run. I think same thing with Spire 1, but the early game is going to be the most threatening, especially when you become better at the game. As your deck building gets better and you know how to make a deck that sort of just wins the end game, and you know how to preserve resources, and your macro ideas and pathing get better, you really just need to survive the early game. And having like an extra brick or two that gets out of the way in the end game is not going to kill you in this game so far. I think in the end game of Spire 1, having an extra backstab or 2 could really stop you from drawing into like your well-laid plans or your piercing wail on the right turn or your wraith form or whatever that you were using to block the heart. But nothing in this game really threatens to kill you on turn 1 and turn 2 in the same way that Spire 1 has things that threaten to kill you on turn 1 and turn 2. And again, if balance changes, if Act 4 is really threatening, this probably changes a lot. But so far, it's just a really solid Act 1, Act 2 card, and that's good enough to put it here. Okay. Blade Dance. So, the function of this card is a lot more different than what it did in Spire 1. At the end of the day, 1 energy deal 12 is always going to be really solid. But I think the main thing is that this is no longer a card that bridges you into accuracy just because of this draw order dependence and Blade Dance exhausting. Notably, it is 1 energy deal 12 that exhausts and gets out of the way, which is good for something like acro, but it does not actually mean that you necessarily want to be picking accuracy to go alongside this. You can think of this as just a front-loaded damage common, and in Spire 1, Silent really struggled for that. We're going to get to a couple of cards later on that I think you will see do this job, but better. They're mostly in the uncommon slot, however. So if you need damage early, like floor 1 or whatever, and you see this, I'm not going to be upset to have it, but I don't think it's super important in the same way that it was in Spire 1. Okay. Blade of Ink. Kind of a bad card. This is probably meant to do something playing with shivs. I think if you would have some sort of shiv thing going on, you'd rather just have accuracy if you're really doing a deck that plays a lot of shivs over and over. You don't want to have to play like 3, 4, 5 cards to have this actually scale to a point where it's very good. And notably, it's not a power. If it were a power, it'd be a lot better, but you have to draw it alongside the thing you're trying to draw. And again, if you try to do too many of these sorts of things, your deck is just going to not be able to function and do any of the things well. Basically, you want to land all these combo pieces together, and this is one of those things that the payoff is not very good for landing it in the first place, so the risk of having it brick is not really worth it either. There's cards that do have insanely high payoff for landing in a combo that can be really worth it. This is just not one of them. So you cannot really afford to risk this bricking. I think for the most part, this is just going to be a really, really bad card. Blur. Inspire 1, this is a lot better. I don't really know how often you're blocking with decks in this, or how much you need to block a ton instead of just ending the fight immediately. But again, if you're not having this infinite style stuff and you're blocking more with dexterity, this is definitely going to be a better way to bridge. And some of the like boat relics that like block, you know, like anchor, hornclate, whatever, can make this a bit easier. But I think Blur was oftentimes supported by having something like Wraith Form or Apparitions that would let you store a bunch of block on one turn and then carry it over to the second. And also Spire 1 has a lot of things like the Heart or Spear and Shield where they sort of give you a turn that's less output and then followed up with a turn that hits you really hard. There are some enemies that do that. The Crab Boss end of Act 2, for example, is one. The Waterfall Giant in Act 1. That sort of thing where having a bunch of block and carrying it over to the next turn to try and meet this like threshold of needing a lot of output is important. But it's less often, I think, in this game than it is in Spire 1. And also, again, it's not a card that helps you line up combos. If you're taking these pieces early game that really want to line up with your acro and other things, then you don't want to be adding cards that are going to get in the way of that. And it's just the unfortunate reality, I think, of some of these damage cards being overtuned that we will get to, that work really well with acro and other commons as well. Okay, Bouncing Flask. I really think poison in this game is bad, but for the most part, if you need some sort of thing to kill an elite and you've literally seen nothing, it can do something. It's boss damage. You don't have to think that hard about it. Just turn it to numbers. Don't think about the poison package in general. With Catalyst not being in the game, I think this is obviously just going to be even worse than it was before. But again, sometimes you just don't have any way to scale your damage, and this is going to be one of those ways. C is like respectable and perfectly pickable in a lot of situations. I think once you start getting to D is where the cards start getting just really bad, and oftentimes you just don't want them. Except for hyper specific cases. Everything up here I think can be picked, and I want that to be very clear in a tier list that this is not meant to be a guide on skip all these cards, pick these cards instead, but rather like how often should these things likely end up in the deck, not a hard and fast rule. Okay, Bubble. An insanely draw order dependent card, and oftentimes I just don't want poison in the first place. This is basically the same thing as something like Bane in Spire 1, which if you are familiar with that game and how strong things are, then you will realize that's not a very good card. I think Bubble maybe is more pickable than these things if you have like one other poison card and you're bridging into that, or maybe you have relics that give poison. I just don't think you really want this very often. With Fumes, sure, but again, usually Fumes is just enough and you can find other ways to do damage. If you have Fumes, then very often you are able to just pick other cards that work with the discard package because Fumes gets out of your deck. And you don't need to worry about picking a bunch of stuff because Fumes is carrying your damage in boss fights, and now you can be very greedy with your drafting and pick the combo pieces that actually win the end game. So most of the time, this is just not going to be super needed. Okay, Bullet Time, energy cheat, but I don't think it's very good in this game. There's just not much of a reason. It's going to brick your combo stuff. Something like Snecko Bullet Time was a big reason to pick it in the past. Pyramid was a big reason to pick it in the past, and those things are way less common in this game. They do exist, but it's off of one specific ancient, and very often you're not going to see those things. You're also not really picking the cards that go with this. You don't really care about Nightmare in this game to like Nightmare Wraith form or something. Those just don't really exist either. So just overall, I think the things you're doing with bullet time kind of went away. The card obviously is completely unchanged from the original, I believe, including the upgrade, but just the payoffs you're getting for it have shifted, and that's why this drops a little bit here. It wasn't a great card Inspire 1, and it's definitely not getting better here. Okay. Burst. I think pretty similar story, to be honest. Burst Apparitions is a lot less common. Burst something like Blur with Dex, a lot less common. Burst on your apps, whatever, Nightmare, who knows? Like, that sort of thing. Bouncing Flash Catalyst. Like, all these things are just a lot worse, just because of how polarized Silent is. And there are going to be spots for it. Again, you might find yourself on a run where the main damage is Poison and Blur and sitting there with Dex and needing to burst a Bouncing Flask, but I don't think that happens very often. There's just not much that threatens Silent now, and I'm sure we will get to some of the cards soon. I can see them down here, that sort of make this strategy just a lot less good. Okay, Calc Gamble. The upgrade has been changed here to include Retain, but I don't think that really matters. You never really upgraded this thing Inspire 1 in the first place. It's a way to get through your deck on the first cycle, to play all your powers, and to exhaust cards, and then after that, your deck should be doing something already. You can't really loop Calc Gamble and play Reflex a bunch of times or whatever, in the way you could Inspire 1, obviously, because it goes away. But I think the fact that you can actually exhaust your entire deck way easier means that is less necessary. Before, Silent could do infinites with like 30, 40 card decks, even 50 card decks. I mean, you're not going to get that very often, but Silent would very frequently have big decks that relied on Calc Gamble discarding 8 to 9 cards and drawing through your entire deck to reach another Calc Gamble and to reach your Tactician Reflex. This game, your decks can be way smaller and way more compact. And so actually using Calc Gamble to dig through all the garbage in your deck is not as needed, because a lot of times the garbage is just not in the deck in the first place. That doesn't make it a worse card. It just served a different purpose, and I just wanted to elaborate on why the upgrade doesn't really change anything. You just don't need to upgrade this thing. You can, but it's just not usually that important. I think in general in this game, resting is a lot better and upgrading is a lot harder because of how scary early game is. You're going to need to rest to have HP into like the Waterfall Giant or things like that to be able to survive. So cards that don't need an upgrade to be good get quite a bit better. I don't think this really needed help. It was definitely S tier in the game before and still S tier now. Okay. Cloak and Dagger. Gain 6 block, add 1 shift to your hand. Yeah, this was not a very good card. Inspire 1, it's serviceable, but do you really want to pick this and then pick accuracy and then need to pick both? I don't think so. It's probably somewhere in here. It's an early game block card. There's just better ways to do that. And I don't think you really need the output of having 4 damage. Like, you can think of this as like Iron Wave, but it's just not enough to want to pick accuracy after this. So it's not really a card that bridges you into accuracy either. And you're going to start seeing this problem with all these shift cards, is that none of them actually make you want to start picking the rest of the shift package. And that leads you to just sort of ignoring it almost entirely. Again, can sometimes pick it. Sometimes it's needed. Sometimes you have this in the deck from a transform or whatever. One of the strongest Niaos in this game is just transform 2 cards. So if you have the combo pieces already, sure, it can get in the deck. That context is a lot different than having to just raw pick it from nothing though. Okay, Corrosive Wave. This is one of the only poison cards that is actually good. So again, combo card that wants to work with something like Calc Gamble or Acro or your Adrenaline. Whenever you draw a card this turn, apply 3 poison to all enemies. This is a new card, but this is a lot of damage. If you play Corrosive Wave into Acro and you draw 3 cards, enemies all get 9 poison, and you still get to draw and do all your stuff. So you're paying 2 energy to do that, and you see more cards and can trigger your other discard synergies or whatever. This is really, really good boss scaling and boss damage if you need it, and also does a lot against enemies like AoE fights in the early game that like really terrify you, to be honest. There's like a lot of elites in the early game that can just kill you outright, and you need ways to deal with multiple enemies. Even some hallway fights and Act 2 elites as well. Like, having AoE in this game is much more important than it was in Spire 1. I talked about that a lot in the Regent tier list. But this is definitely a much better card and scales into the endgame as well. When your discard engine sort of comes online and you can apply sometimes infinite poison, but if not, even if you're just applying like 15, 20 poison from doing something like acro into gamble, that is enough to warrant this card in the deck. I think it's very, very solid. Quite a good card. I think the upgrade is just to 4 poison. You don't really need to upgrade it. If you're managing to make this thing work and draw like 3, 4, 5 cards after you play it, it's probably good enough. So again, a card that's standalone, doesn't need the upgrade to actually go in, and does a lot throughout the entire course of the game. Okay, Dagger Spray. I do think this is probably better than it was in Spire 1. Again, because of AoE. Just being more important. I don't think that you really need it. But if you're super desperate, you have no AoE before the first elite, it is something you can definitely think about. Almost all the elites have or all the acts and all the different elites, so like all 6 of them, I think almost half of them, or a little bit over half, really want you to have some sort of AoE. So it can do quite a bit, and there's a lot of hallways inside of Act 2 that AoE actually is important for. And that wasn't true in Spire 1, so Dagger Spray fell off a lot faster. Even the AoE fight in Spire 1, Sentries didn't really want you to have AoE, it wanted you to kill one enemy quickly. But in this game, there's the eels that get shields when you hit one enemy, so it's harder to burst one of them down. You kind of need to kill them all over time, slowly. And there's a lot of summoning things that happen in Act 2, Act 3, etc. So I wouldn't want to put this in D tier. I think in Spire 1 it pretty easily goes into D tier, but probably just goes into C for now. Could see it being at the bottom of B. It's somewhere here. It's not super important exactly where, but it's definitely more pickable than it was. Okay, Dagger Throw. I think this is a little bit worse than it was in Spire 1. Silent needed damage a lot more, but it is a discard enabler, so it's still going to get some sort of playtime, I should say, from the early game picks. I don't think you often need it as much, just because the 9 damage is sometimes not as relevant due to other cards in the pool. I'm not going to talk about it too much right now. I'm just going to wait until we get to those cards to really discuss the context of that. But I don't think it's like super, super good anymore. It's still a very solid damage common, and the effect is good. Just triggering discard synergies is quite good. The payoffs are really, really good. So if you have nothing else to trigger payoffs and you need something, then this is fine. There's just way better commons that do that. Okay. Dash. Early game card, just blocks. Again, doesn't enable anything. This is just a solid chunky card. It's not actually going to do anything sort of in the end game at all, but that's not changed from Spire 1 either. So this is early game pretty much almost exclusively. The number is big. I think there's less frail in this game than there was in Spire 1, so having a big number on your block like this instead of multiple small numbers is not as important, but can still do quite a bit and gets you through the early game, which again is still probably the hardest part of the game by a lot. Okay, Deadly Poison. I don't really need to talk about this, I don't think. The number is just not very good. I already went through a lot of context on why poison is just not really needed anymore. Probably goes above Bubble, I would assume, just because this relies on you having other poison in your deck and you're not going to need it. This can actually get you to maybe have boss scaling, but this is an ultra desperation pick. I do not want it. It does not really want to be in the deck almost ever. Okay, Deflect. Unfortunately, I think this got a lot worse. Again, from other cards that have been added to the silent card pool. I don't think it was amazing in Spire 1 either, but definitely had more use cases. Just now, it's not really got a niche as a block card at all. There's just better things. Okay, Dodge and Roll, pretty similar. Blocking with Dex way less. Another card that sort of bricks you. I don't want to pay 1 energy into this. At least Deflect is free and gets on my hand and makes space for me to play my acro and other draw cards. This does not do that. If you have it come green and you have a Footwork in the deck, sure, maybe. I have not really had any runs, and I think I've put the second most amount of time into Silent compared to Regent, which is why I'm doing this video now. I've not really had any runs where I felt the need to take this, and I've won very consistently on Silent, probably more than any other character by quite a lot. Okay. Echoing Slash. I think I've had this once. If you get it early game, obviously it's going to be better than something like Dagger Spray. I do think it being a rare hurts you. I don't think I'm going to see this at the end of Act 1 and want to pick it. And that's when you're going to see it most often. So if you get this early game in Act 1, it's going to do a lot. It's fine. It's just not a really special card. Doesn't enable anything. It's just damage. That is all it is. Sometimes that's what you need, but it's not enabling any engine. And again, this game is so combo heavy and really reliant on lining certain things up for output that I don't think I want to be willingly adding a lot of this kind of card into my deck. You want a few of them that are standalone, like Dash, that just sort of do their thing and then you ignore it later. But I don't think the demand for these sort of things is needed as much, just because, again, the packages that come with the discard stuff are so much better than they were in Inspire 1. Okay. And Venom, I think this is like a really bad card. Shiv stuff is way less common than it used to be. And usually, like, Blade Dance was like the main way you'd scale this with Snecko Skull or something, and then it's pickable. I don't think it's really changed much since Inspire 1. If anything, it's gotten worse. Yeah, not much to talk about. There's just other better ways to deal boss damage, and that's really all this thing is. 2 energy is so hard to play in this game just because of the way that energy relics work, that I cannot justify putting this in any higher than this, I don't think. Okay. Escape plan. Fine. Knob doesn't exist anymore. So if anything, this got a bit better. It's sort of just free block, do the thing. That's all it is. There's not a whole lot of reason why you care. It works with after image. It works with like letter opener, whatever. Kind of nice with decks. You can sort of just pick this now and get punished for it way less. There's a few things that limit card plays. The deer at the end of Act 1, that's a huge reason why, maybe you don't want to take this. But other than that, most of the time you're just going to have this be a positive thing. It's never really going to hurt you. Okay, apparently Envenom upgrades to 2 poison per attack. But honestly, I think that the upgrade to 1 energy would still be better. I just cannot find a way to play this almost ever. Okay. Expertise. A little bit better than Spire 1, to be honest, just because of how much you want the discard stuff. But I still think it's a little bit clunky. There's just other better ways to draw cards. Again, I've had this pop off from Transform, like literally today. And I will be uploading that run, so you can feel free to watch that, how that performed. It does do things. It really wants an upgrade, and I think that hurts it in the context of this game because upgrades are just harder to come by than they were in Spire 1. But it's just not attached to discard. It can draw a bunch of cards if you're discarding constantly, like something with prepared or something, and fill you back up to hand size. So it can do things. It can serve as like the 1 draw card in your engine to actually enable an infinite. So it does get picked, but I don't think it's very often. Okay. Exposed. This is a new card. I think it's quite good. Remove all artifacts and block from the enemy. Apply 2 vulnerable. Exhaust. 0 energy for this. So the fact that you get debuffs and vulnerable, this is sort of like Terror, except obviously shorter. But I think in general with this character, your fights are going to be shorter than they were in Spire 1. There's less blocking. Your front-loaded damage is a lot higher, so being able to like kill something is quite nice. I might reorder this tier a little bit. I think this is a very, very solid card, though. It's almost something you really do want. It lets you put weak on the enemies as well. And there's a decent amount of artifact in this game. Not a ton, but enough that utility is going to be useful. Block as well. There's like enemies in Act 2 that when block is removed from them, they get stunned. I don't remember what they're called, but the extra utility on this is nice. Really, it's just like a vulnerable damage amplification. It's like a terror that I don't have to upgrade. That's just a huge boon to actually having front load to kill something. And again, silent killing stuff on turn 1 is really common in this game. You have built-in bagger prep as per usual. So your turn 1 draw is often better than the other characters, obviously, and lines up combos more often. So you're going to be able to get your front load and actually kill an enemy before they can move. And this just helps you do that. So it serves like a similar purpose, I think, to backstab with extra utility as well. It's just good front load, and having terror helps kill the elites. There's no knob, so you don't even get punished for having to play a skill in that fight. There's just a lot of context, I think, that increases the value of something like this. In Spire 1, maybe this is not as good. I think it's probably still solid, but in this game, definitely it's better. Okay. Fan of Knives. Shivs now hit all enemies. Add 4 shivs in your hand. I have never played with this card. I've never seen it. I don't think it's super great. Again, if you're leaning into this, you probably want other Shiv synergies. The problem is that this one costs 2, so it's 16 AoE basically, which is fine. If you get this early, you can take 16 AoE for 2, and it exhausts, and it gets out, whatever. But like, I'm never really often having other Shiv cards, and that is the problem. To get actual value out of this, I would love to have accuracy. I would love to have something else that works with this, or have a blade dance that makes, you know, more AoE happen. It's just unfortunate that Blade Dance exhausts now, and I think honestly they could just change this back and the balance of this character would change a lot. They might be able to nerf like other parts of the kit and buff the Blade Dance, just not exhaust, and that would bridge you into being able to pick something like this, but it's just not good. You just don't really care for these synergies at all. It doesn't get you anything. It's really just what you see is what you get on this card, and you can just read it as 16 AoE for 2 that exhausts, and that's just fine, but not super significant. Okay, finisher. Unfortunately, I think you need this way less than Inspire 1. I'll put this in D. Again, Blade Dance is exhausting, so your main bridge card to get into this is sort of gone. You need early game damage less on this character just because you have better options, so you're not as desperate to pick this, say, if you saw this on floor 1, as you would have been in Spire 1. So finisher just gets in the deck way less often, and you just don't really need it as much as you used to. Okay. Flanking, this is a multiplayer card, so let's not talk about that. Flechettes did get a buff in this game, and to be honest, I think it got quite a bit better. 5 damage is very significant. Even in just like an okay case, let's say you remove 1 strike or something, this can very often be 1 energy deal 15. If you upgrade this, it goes to 7, and so like 1 energy deal 21 in just sort of an okay case is quite solid. If you have something like acro or backflip that you want to be picking anyways, and converting these cards into damage, this will do that. You get card selection with something like prepared acro, whatever, and then suddenly Flechettes is hitting for a lot of damage for very little energy. It's just a much more solid card than it used to be. I'm way more willing to pick this, I think. I might up Abrasive into here. I think it feels a little weird sitting down here with these sorts of cards. And maybe I'll drop Blur a little bit just into the next tier. Honestly, having like so few cards in B tier feels weird, but we'll hopefully round that out a little bit. Okay. Flicflack, slide, deals 7 damage to all enemies. This is a new card. Notably, you can play it for 1 energy, which is quite nice. It's a little bit of AoE, but I think the biggest thing is that this usually just costs 0. That is quite good. I think like as an early game damage common, this is something that I can pick very frequently and not feel super bad about. I don't think it's one of the premium damage options. The number is not huge on it. I would almost rather have some of the really big damage number single target things, I think, and just loop them more often. But this is still going to land pretty frequently as long as you have some of these other things in the deck. And again, having remove 2 and transform 2 be really frequent from Niao, and the thing that you pick very frequently means that your combos line up more often. I think on Silent, those 2 Niaos are pretty polarizing, and you just click them over everything else no matter what. You always get it for minus max HP. And before, in the old game, you would often get it for something like Curse for Transform 2, which is a lot harder to pick, or Current HP for Transform 2, which is a lot harder to pick. But now you basically always get it like no downside, and that is going to let you pick sort of this kind of thing more often. Again, new card that sort of enables a lot of these synergies. Okay, follow through. 1 energy, deals 6 damage to all enemies. If the last card you played this turn was a skill, apply 1 weak to all enemies. This is not really picked for the damage. Like 6 AoE damage can do something. I believe the upgrade is just damage and it doesn't upgrade the amount of weak. So it's really just like artifact strip or weak all, which is still fine. I think this is like a very pickable card, but I wouldn't call it amazing. It's probably like top of C. Just having debuffs is good. And the AoE is relevant in the early game, even though the damage number is not super big. It sort of just does 2 things like okay and not great. The last card being a skill this turn is completely trivial. That will just always happen. There's other cards, again, that work with this as well. The skill thing, we will get to that. But this is often just weak the entire enemy. Maybe do some chip damage and be pretty happy about it. But it's not amazing. Okay, Footwork. I still think this deserves to be an A. If you pick this early, you kind of just stop taking chip damage. Unfortunately, you cannot play it for free like you can with Abrasive. I don't think you're really needing to scale into an endgame where you're blocking like 50, 60 a turn, so you don't need like multiple copies of this. Oftentimes, I only really want one, and I think that's like about it. This will just make you be able to block the like giant head elites in Act 1, as well as most of the Act 1 bosses. It doesn't really need the upgrade. 2 is perfectly fine as a number here. And it's a cheap power that costs 1, so it's just as good as it was in Spire 1, really. There's less times that you really sit around and need multiple footworks like you did in Spire 1, but it still definitely serves the purpose of just stopping you from taking chip. And that's alone enough to maybe buy you upgrades on important cards like acro, that actually work with your engine and help line up your combo pieces. So if it does that job and it gets out of the deck later and stops you from like completely getting destroyed when you need to block like 30 in the end game, then, you know, it's a pretty good card. Okay. Grand Finale. I have not seen this card, but again, it's unchanged from Spire 1. I don't know if the upgrade is much better or anything. I think there's less of a reason that you need this card now, but it's also simultaneously easier to play than it was in Spire 1 as well. So it probably just remains in a pretty similar spot. I think, honestly, this is probably one of the most underrated cards for a lot of people in Spire 1. Like, it's easier to play, and the payoff is worth it. If you can actually manage to play Grand Finale somewhat consistently, it's going to be very, very strong. It is harder to find Retain and Slay the Spire 2, but it is also easier to draw your entire deck in one turn than it was before. And there are like enchantments and things that you can add onto cards that will help do this. Like draw cards on when you play powers and things like that, that make this a bit easier to land. Again, I don't think it's like one of the premium options. It's just a little too finicky sometimes, but it's definitely not as hard as you might think it would be to have this do a lot. Okay, hand trick, new card. Gain 7 block, add slide to a skill in your hand this turn. I think this is like kind of a bad card. It can do something, but I don't really want to spend 1 energy to add slide to something to cheat energy cost. Really, all this does is situational energy cheating. It only adds slide for 1 turn, so you can't really go infinite super easily with it. You can't set something up and then cycle it later. You'd have to do it like the same turn. And I don't really know exactly what you'd want to be setting up with this to make it worth carrying a somewhat brick around. I think it's very possible I'm underrating this card. Maybe we can throw it here. Like 7 block is a really decent number. And I can definitely see some of the potential of it, of actually, you know, triggering some sort of combo on turn 1 that you really want. But for the most part, I'm not picking the expensive cards anyways that I would want this to combo with, because of the fact that energy is just harder to do and you just don't really need it. So maybe there's going to be some run in the near future after I play more that this is going to like pop off or something. I think this is one of the bigger mystery cards that maybe gets better over time as we optimize the game more, but right now it doesn't feel like I really need it to like win almost every run. Okay. Haze. Sly. Apply 4 poison to all enemies. This is a new card. Costs 3 to play normally, but of course you're never playing that. I think this is comparable to Flicflack. Probably a little bit worse as like an early game damage card, but the second you get into late Act 1 when you have more ways of triggering it, it's just a better payoff. It also upgrades to 6 poison here, but this can be something you can loop to strip artifact. Obviously paying this for 0 and having it just tick down can be boss scaling. Art's really sick. Not relevant in this case, but I think it's a cool card that is definitely worth picking. Again, all these slide cards, all the payoffs, like you can see why acro is so good because there's so many things that work with it now. They've really expanded the acro package, and just being able to line up your combo is more important. Acro itself cheats energy on all of these things when before acro didn't really have a way of cheating energy. Paying the 1 to acro in the previous game was not as good. Obviously, Acro is quite a strong card, but it was not nearly as good as it is now. I think this card just got a lot better because of the context surrounding it. Okay, Hidden Daggers, 0 energy, discard 2 cards, add 2 shivs into your hand. Really, I read this as discard 2 cards. The shivs are relevant, but it's not something I really think about. I think this is probably just somewhere in C tier, maybe closer to the top because it just says discard on it. But as an uncommon, I don't think I really see a purpose for this. I really think I would just rather have prepared because it actually draws 2 cards instead of just discarding the cards out of my hand. You kind of need other things to actually fill hand. Just discarding 2 cards, like really, I can only think of reflex that's going to work super well with this. Maybe you can do something with like expertise. So if you get a transform on this, I'm probably way happier to see it. 1, because transforms mean the combos work more often. You have less base cards. And then 2, I can more easily pick stuff that works with it. But I think overall it's really weird. I wouldn't really want to pick it super early without some other reason to have it. And it's a lot easier to just raw pick an acro than it is to pick this thing, or a lot easier to raw pick or prepare than it is to pick hidden daggers. Maybe this is something that I really will come around to, but I think it's pretty situational. I can definitely see how there are runs where you definitely want this thing. But for most runs, I don't think I see this early, and it's very compelling. Okay, Infinite Blades. Inspire 1, hot take, this thing is actually pretty good. Again, Inspire 2, Shiv synergies really got hurt. Funnily enough, I think this thing works with Shiv synergies better than almost anything else. It's probably like the #1 thing that actually works with them. But it is a little bit slow, and in this game, I just don't really feel the need to have to do that. If you have no other damage, it can help chip into a boss. It can also combo with a few other things. Maybe you get a Shiv like accuracy buff or whatever from a transform, and I pick this, and now I have like decent output over the course of the fight, and I sit around and block and let my like 1 Shiv that deals like 8, 10, 12, whatever, go in over the fight. But I think it's not super necessary. If the game is harder than I think it is, then maybe it goes up. I'm definitely not going to put this in like D or something with the rest of these, but it's just like kind of a mid card. That's about it. Okay. Knife Trap. Play every Shiv in your exhaust pile on the enemy. Again, super draw order reliant card. Costs 2 energy, new. It's just not really going to do anything. Again, Blade Dance exhausting means that when can you really stack up a bunch of Shivs in your exhaust pile? You need to pick like a ton of things that work with this, and the whole package is just worse because Blade Dance is worse. Having the best common card that gets you into the archetype be way worse is just not going to lend to this being a good card. Willing to change my mind on this somehow if maybe that gets buffed, but I think 2 energy is just too steep of a cost. You don't ever want to play this thing on turn 1. I don't really see how this ever gets better than about here. Okay, Leading Strike. Deal 7 damage, add 1 Shiv to your hand. Maybe this was their attempt at sort of making Blade Dance do something. This is 1 energy, deal 11. So overall, the rate's fine, but like, I'd much rather have Dagger Spray at this point. Because the AoE is actually valuable. I'd much rather have a Dagger Throw to help enable synergies, or have the payouts, or have the Flechettes that actually does a lot of damage. It's okay. I'm not going to put it in Z because like it is like a decent damage common if you're really desperate, but it's not something I really ever want in the deck. It's just the numbers on it are good enough, and it has like probably enough synergies to get in the deck sometimes. Maybe it deserves to go like here or something. But yeah, it's just not enough, I don't think. There's a lot of things that only make like 1 Shiv now, which is just really sad. Okay, Leg Sweep, completely unchanged from the base game. Weakness is broken. This is like just easy A tier. If you're going to add any cards to the deck that don't contribute to your combo package, then they better be good ones. This is just an insane amount of output and one of the best sources of actually getting weak. So it just gets in the deck immediately. Pretty much means you never take damage in hallways now. Weakness is insanely good in this game. I think that's like one of the only things you actually need in order to have enough block output for like every fight in the game. If you can weak the enemy, you probably can block them. All the elites in Act 1 just get owned by weak. Even the the Eels of Doom having weak on an enemy is just really, really strong. Obviously, AoE weak from something like the follow through is going to be better in that fight, but almost every other one, Leg Sweep, is going to massively outperform. Okay, Malaise. I do think this is worse than it was in the first game. I think it's still a decent card. I wouldn't put it at the top of A or in anywhere close to S like it used to be. One of the main purposes in Inspire 1 was like Awaken 1, Time Eater, you know, Act 3 bosses that you know you're going to have to fight. You always fight one of those. And the Heart, obviously, that is very strong in. There's nothing in this game really like that. I think Act 2, there's like the Beekeeper enemy that multi-hits you pretty frequently. But for the most part, there's not a whole lot of small, like really numerous amounts of multi-hits. So it's a lot worse. Weak is obviously still really solid. If you can pay energy to this or you have Chemax or whatever, it's going to still perform. Obviously, it gets out of the deck as well if you just need to exhaust it. And it's not going to ever really super get in the way. But it's definitely got less uses than it did in Spire 1. Fortunately, again, if you can weak the enemy, you probably block it. If you can pay in Act 1 to just like put weakness on the boss or put weakness on an elite, it's still going to be extremely solid, but it's just not quite as good. Still solid. I'll probably move backflip a little bit down here. That seems a little bit more fair. And maybe we can throw this like here or something. Okay, Master Planner. Whenever you play a skill, it gains Sly. This is for the rest of combat. It is kind of insane when it's doing stuff. I think it is a little bit win more, and by a little bit, I mean a lot win more. If the deck is really good for it, you will know. If you need output, this is just energy cheat, basically, in long fights. But for the most part, I don't think you really need this thing very frequently. It's probably like B tier somewhere, like bottom of B. It can really pop off and make like a discard deck actually scale in a boss fight. And that's like probably what it's going to be used for most of the time. But I don't think I just want to like randomly add this into my deck early game. It's pretty hard to play until it's upgraded. I believe it goes to 1 energy. But again, energy is harder to come by. Upgrades are harder to come by. It feels a lot harder to actually put it in the deck in the first place. If it is going to pop off, you will know it, and it can be something like S tier, but again, more situational. I think this is more trying to express broadly how often these things are going to be good. Okay, Memento Mori, new card, 1 energy, deal 8 damage, deals 4 additional damage for each card discarded this turn. This is okay. I don't think it's an amazing card. There's better payoffs and we still haven't gotten to them yet, but yeah, this is just like 1 energy, doesn't have Sly keyword, so it doesn't really actually work with the stuff you're trying to do with discard, but it's just sort of awkward, right? It can do something if you need damage. It always does the 8 and can just sort of do more. But like oftentimes this is going to be really good with like a Calc gamble into it or like a prepared or something. If you're doing those things, you probably have something else you'd rather be doing, and you don't want to be paying the 1 energy because you want to be paying the energy to just play your acro and draw instead. Okay, Mirage, 1 energy, gain block equals to poison on all enemies exhaust. I mean, how often do you really have poison on the enemies? At least it exhausts. Probably goes like maybe in C for like Twisted Funnel, probably in D tier. At least it gets out of the way, but like it can block late in a fight, but again, it needs you to have setup already. It's just kind of weird. I don't think I've ever clicked this. I don't see a real reason to. I can think of very hyper specific situations where it probably gets in the deck, but I don't really want it. Okay, Murder. Deal 1 damage, deal 1 additional damage for each card drawn this combat. This is really weird boss scaling. I don't think I ever want this thing. I never want to draw it in the first cycle at all. If you're in a deck that's going to have this payoff because you're drawing a lot of cards, well, I don't want to draw this because I'm probably just going infinite. And then this is just bricking me. So I have never had a situation. Of course, this is like day 4 or something. And I have like 35, 40 hours in the game now. And most of that on Silence and Regent. But I don't think that this has ever really come up as something useful. And if it's not come up in that amount of playtime, it's probably not very good. Again, we can be super wrong about all these things. And also balance of the game will change. If you see this and the balance patch is hit in like 2 weeks from now or whatever, I don't know how often they're going to be doing adjustments, but in Spire 1, it was like every week or every other week. So it can be, it can change quickly. But I just don't think I ever really want this thing. Again, it's slow scaling. It does do eventually a bunch of damage, but in the first deck cycle, that I think is the most important anyways, I'd rather not just add a brick into my deck. Okay. Neutralize starter card. Don't really care to talk about it. Nightmare. I think this is worse than it was. I really can't think of a whole lot of situations where I want to nightmare something. I think I have to put it in C just because of the insane utility obviously it could have, but for the most part, a lot of the payoffs are much harder to find. Wraith form is like boss exclusive now, or like ancient exclusive. Apparitions are much rarer, same deal. Less often are you going to have something like a catalyst, because that doesn't exist anymore, that you want to nightmare. The energy to actually play it is a lot harder to come by. I don't really know what you're nightmaring. Even Calc Gamble is not really an option anymore because it exhausts. So doing things like nightmaring your Calc Gamble and having 2 reflexes in the deck and going infinite isn't really a thing anymore. I don't know how you're going to nightmare after image and play all the after images. There's just not enough energy to do it. So until I see a reason to nightmare something to have enough output, I don't think this really ever goes higher. I've not really struggled for output yet on this character. Almost every time I play it, I feel like I'm just really, really strong. And never have issues blocking enough or doing enough damage. I feel like Silent, again, is just like the strongest character in the game so far. So right now, this is just not needed at all. Okay, Noxious Fumes. This is really, really good boss scaling. Good AoE in a lot of fights that you never have to draw into again. It just works, like in the Elite that adds a bunch of statuses into your deck that deal 3 damage and it splits into a bunch of little guys. This is going to do really, really well in that fight, and it has done really well in a lot of hallways, in Act 2, in the bosses, whatever. This is like one of the few good poison cards. I do think the artifact strip aspect of it is a lot less needed than it was in Spire 1. But the fact that it's a power that you play and it continues doing the thing and never gets in the way of your combos lets you pick it for early game damage, and then never think about it again. It does need the upgrade. It's pretty weird without it, so that is like one thing that drops it down a little bit, but it is just a million damage in every boss fight ever, and yeah, it's quite good. Okay, Outbreak. New card, 1 energy. Every 3 times you apply poison, deal 11 damage to all enemies. Super clunky, really awkward. I never want to pick poison cards anyways for the most part. If I am, they don't really work with this. I think this is meant to work with like Envenom, in Shivs, and like Bouncing Flask or something. It's pretty much just Hopium. There's things that work with it. I can see like what they were going for, but unfortunately the other packages are just so much stronger that you just don't need this. I don't think that's going to change unless they change a lot of numbers on this and maybe make this like every time or something, or every other time, and then poison gets a whole lot better and you can actually build a deck around this thing. But the payoff's just not big enough for how much work it actually requires you to do. And yeah, I don't think the transition into building a deck centered around poison is ever going to happen. I think in general, archetypes on silence really don't exist. It's really just discard. Everything else is just turn it into numbers, and if the numbers are good enough, you can play it, but the numbers, unfortunately, are just not good enough. Phantom Blade. Shivs gain retain. The first Shiv you play each turn deals 9 additional damage. It's power. That's new. This is what I was talking about with the Infinite Blade synergy. I think if you like transform into this and you see Infinite Blades, you really want the Infinite Blades now, because then you just deal like 13 damage every turn, but it is kind of awkward. Again, you don't get anything for playing this the turn you play it. It's kind of just like once a turn accuracy, but quite strange. I think like most of the time you never want this thing. Again, you just don't really care about any of the Shiv cards in general, so probably goes somewhere in here. Very like weird boss scaling if you absolutely need it. Again, stuff here still gets picked. I'm not saying never pick the stuff, but it's really fringe. Okay, Piercing Whale. If you're familiar at all with Spire 1, you know where this is going. It's not doing the thing that it did in the heart, but it blocks a million. There's more AoE fights in this game than there were, so this card is better earlier than it was in Spire 1. It just blocks way too much. Anything that is AoE, it's already performing in. Anything that multi-hits you, it's performing in. It doesn't need to be the best card ever and like block a million in heart like it used to. It used to be like clearly like, if you have Piercing Whale, you can win the run, and if you don't, sometimes you have no counterplay. That it used to be. It's not doing that, but it is just playing everywhere, and before it didn't always do that either. So it's still an insanely good card. I don't know why this thing is still common. This should just be moved to uncommon, almost certainly. There's no reason why I should be able to pick this up and then just full block every AoE fight ever. It's just gross card. Again, if you're familiar with Spire 1, I don't really need to explain much more of that. You know how stupid this card is. It's a little bit worse than it was in Spire 1 just for the heart context, but still just disgusting. Okay. Pinpoint. This card is gross. It is 3 energy, deals 17 damage, costs 1 less for each skill played this turn. 17 damage with no upgrade is absurd. And the thing it lets you do is play acro into play a bunch of blocks, which is something you want to be doing anyways. And it deals 1,000,000 damage. It's like Eviscerate, except it actually works. That's pretty much it. This is what I was talking about when I was saying acro with other cards. This is another thing that just works super, super well with acro, because you will have the skills to play. It does way too much damage. Just a really, really gross card. This is basically enough damage for the entire run. You can loop it in the end game as well. It literally never falls off. You just play acro into Pinpoint over and over and over and over again. If you have any sort of energy gen, that's just going to kill anything. But it's still an insane amount of output. It works really well with the new Vuln, with Expose. This package is just gross. If you can get these 2 cards, if you can get something like Prepared, it's disgusting, disgusting card. Okay, Peace Tab. It's a damage common. It does something. It's pretty comparable here. I think these are about the same. Artifact Strip, again, not as useful as it was. Less poison synergies that I actually care about. It's just not very good. We don't need to talk about it. Just see it as deal like 11 damage or whatever it is. 12, I don't know. It's not super great. It just does the thing. It's just, that's it. It's a card that deals damage. Not much to say. Okay, Pounce. 2 energy, attack, deal 12 damage. The next skill you play costs 0. Most of the time I don't have skills that cost 2 or more. You can discount like Nightmare, so I guess if you transform into this, it can open some things. Notably, it does persist over turns, which is something I think they changed the wording on a lot of cards, so you can set up future plays. But for the most part, you can basically think of this as 1 energy deal 12, because you can just like discount a defend or something and just treat it as like the defend costed 1 and this cost 1, whatever. It makes it easier to think about. But you know where 1 energy deal 12 goes, it's like right around here. It has like a little bit more utility, so maybe we can bump it up a tiny bit, but I don't think I ever really want this thing. It feels very awkward. If I transform, I'm not like super sad about it, but I'm not adding it into the deck almost ever. Okay, Precise Cut. 0 energy, deal 13 damage, deal 2 less damage for each other card in your hand. This is another really, really dumb card that works with Prepared and Acro. Really, really solid damage comment. It works with your base deck because you already have Survivor. If you're just playing 3 other cards in your hand at the beginning of every turn and you're drawing 5 cards, this thing is still dealing 11 for 0 energy. So it doesn't even care about what else you're playing in your hand. If you're just playing 2 strikes and a defend or something and you play Precise Cut, that is really, really stupid. Again, another card that costs 0, you can loop it. Obviously, it has more issues with that since like you probably have a full hand. But it does a lot of damage early game and falls off a little bit more in the end game compared to something like Pinpoint. It's just the number on it's really high, and you can often get this to do the full 13 very frequently. So very, very solid card. Okay, Predator. I think this is a little worse than the first game. When you have something like Pinpoint now at uncommon, Predator is a little bit worse. I don't think that Predator is a bad card by any means. Like 15 for 2 and the draw 2 next turn thing is pretty useful still. I might drop this to B, like top of B or something. Maybe I'd honestly draw backflip here. Maybe people are going to be upset about this, but I don't like backflip that much. Predator is quite solid for early game damage, and the utility is still decent. There's things that can discount this to like 0 cost, like potions that make it cost 0 every time. There's some like weird synergies that work with it. For the most part, again, it's just a big damage card. Silent just needs that less because you have better options now. Not necessarily better than Predator, but just better overall. So oftentimes if you have like 1 or 2 damage cards already, I don't really want the Predator. I just want to have my engine work and pick the acro and not overpick a bunch of crap. If you're picking Sly cards, you need to be a little bit pickier about what else you're adding into the deck, because anything you add just bloats and means the Sly cards work less often. So the macro ideas and the drafting strategies behind having these discard engines is a little bit harder to get used to, I will say. I think it feels very strong probably for all the players that were good at Slay the Spire 1. If you are overpicking cards, it's probably not going to feel as broken. I definitely have had people say that they don't feel like Silent is that strong, as in like new players or players that are not super top level at Slay the Spire in general. But if you're familiar with the ideas behind Slay the Spire 1 drafting and macro, you're probably going to have a lot of success with Silent in this game. And I think maybe that's why the win rate's so high compared to what it is and why everyone's having a lot of success on it. It's just very similar to what we were already doing, and now we have more options and die in the early game less because the options we have to deal damage are better. That's pretty much all there is to say about that. Okay, prepared. Stupid as hell card. Again, having these bridge cards that get you into archetypes are really, really important. This works with Pinpoint to literally make energy. This just discounts Pinpoint for free. Triggers every single slide card. Draws into cards to line up combos more. The upgrade is disgusting. Draw 2, discard 2. Like, the discard 2 is actually relevant more than you might think. Inspire 1, I think towards the end of it, we started really evaluating Prepared as a very, very, very good card. So this comes as no surprise, I think, to people that were familiar with that. But maybe if you're a new player or new to this game, you may not think Prepared is super insane. It is. It just works with everything. The whole package surrounding it is really gross. The upgrade is very strong again. So if you just take this and upgrade it, it's probably going to do disgusting things. You can just always find your combos. It just does everything you want for 0 energy in a game that is super energy limited and oftentimes generates energy with Tactician or with the Pinpoint and so forth. Okay, reflex. I want to just throw this in S tier. I think if I'm being realistic, it's probably an A tier just because you cannot really raw pick it super easily still. But the payoff for actually doing it and getting it to work is really, really high. It's also just still playable for some reason if you have 3 energy or maybe have the thing that discounts it to play it. You can actually use it in situations where before it was literally unplayable. So it just works with the 2 commons that you're going to be picking anyways with these. You're picking Prepared and Acro pretty much on site now. At least I am. So having reflex is just going to work. It works a little bit less with Acro in general, but again, the other thing that they just changed in this game was that Sly plays cards now, which actually works for Pinpoint. So anything that counts a card play, this still triggers off of for some unknown reason. It's just better than it was in Spire 1, and it was already a really, really good card. So maybe just for the sake of having people realize that this card is insane, I'm just going to put it in S. I think putting an A is like probably more realistic, but also doing it a disservice at the same time. So it's just a disgusting card. It just works with everything in the package. It just plays nicely with these sorts of things that like didn't exist before. There's extra synergies around this. It's just gross. Okay, Ricochet, another slide card. I don't love this thing, but I do think the number on it's big enough that it just deserves to go somewhere in here around Flicflack. Again, you can ignore the 2 energy costs on this. It just slide, deal 3 damage to a random enemy 4 times. There are like things that this interacts with kind of nicely. Strength potion, you can enchant it to make it deal 2 more damage. You can enchant it to make it deal 5 more damage every time you play it. There's a lot of random things that just make this card better in the end game. I think the lack of targeting is like one of the things that makes it really rough. And then like the Beekeeper in Act 2 that adds a bunch of dazes, but just don't discard it. It's fine. It does things. It's discard payoff. And really what you're going to think about a lot is taking discard cards, getting some sort of payoff, and just rolling with it. You don't necessarily need the absolute best payoff to do anything. You just need something, and this will be something that's worth looping. It really just reads 0 energy, deal 12, and that's really, really good. Just in B tier, just because there's other options, but I think in a vacuum, if you see this thing, you should be like pretty happy that you have some sort of payoff if you already have like the prepared acro stuff in your deck. Akabeko as well, yeah. It's not like insane, but it does stuff. Okay, Serpent form. Whenever you play a card, deal 4 damage to a random enemy. This is 3 energy to play and just very often not needed. I think we can go ahead and talk about Speedster here since this is very comparable. If you're going to be doing this, I think why they had this is because they wanted it to work with Shivs. But again, Shivs just doesn't really work. It's just not as good as it used to be. I think it's okay. You can still do things. But for the most part, the way you're playing a lot of cards is you're going infinite. And if you're playing a lot of cards, you're drawing a lot of cards. So really what this is that it's just Speedster, but worse. Costs more to play. And Speedster, I think, already is not a super great card. If you're making this really broken, it's a little win more. AoE is kind of valuable, but it's hard to play early. This upgrade doesn't go to 1 energy either, so to deploy it, you're always paying 2, which is just kind of too much. It's fine. I've had runs where it's really just quality of life over anything. I think it's probably like top of C. I definitely think you can pick it often, and it's going to do stuff, and it scales like, again, it's like discard payoff. It's not necessarily discard, but if you're doing discard stuff, you're drawing cards, and it's doing AoE damage. So it can do stuff. I'm not saying it's a bad card by any means. It's just kind of awkward and hard to pick early. One thing is, when I first saw this, I thought it would work with the cards you draw at the start of your turn, and that would be a lot better. Unfortunately, it doesn't. So it's not doing 10 free AoE. You do actually have to play draw cards, but luckily it's really easy to just pick the draw cards in this game. So often you do end up with a deck that Speedster is good in. The thing is, if you have the other stuff, the other discard payoffs, you probably don't want to be paying the energy and drawing into this, because it's going to brick you in your first cycle. Okay, Serpent form. Again, let's just put this like bottom of C or D or something. It's like whatever. I feel like for 3 energy powers, you're comparing this to something like Void form. You're comparing it to Wraith form. You're comparing it to like all these things, Echo form, that win the fight when you play it. This doesn't win the fight when you play it. It doesn't generate a ton of output. It doesn't immediately end. So you paying 20 HP to play a 3 energy card needs to do something, and it's just not doing enough. It's just kind of whatever. Again, if you need payoffs for certain things, sometimes you just need the damage and you need the payoffs. It will kill stuff in boss fights, but carrying a brick around to kill something in boss fights just doesn't feel very good, when I feel like there's so many ways to kill bosses, and you just don't need it as much anymore. Again, why poison is so much worse. You just need this kind of thing less. Okay. Shadow Meld, double your block game this turn. This card is just like kind of trash. Again, it's a combo card. I want to play a defend after it or whatever. How often are you playing a block card that blocks more than 5? Not very often. If you are, why am I playing 1 energy to do that? To get another defend, rather than just playing another defend. If you're playing like multiple things that block more than 5 a turn, sure. But I don't really know of anything in the game that asks you to block that much. You just don't need it. If this costs 0, I can definitely see it doing something. I don't know what the upgrade would be at that point if it just costs 0, but like I never want to actually upgrade this thing to make it play. Like basically you can think of Shadow Meld as like anticipate, but I have to use the upgrade on it to get the value out of it. And I already don't think this is like a super amazing card either. Like, why do I want this? I don't want to draw it and then have to play my other stuff and combo it with things. But like my combo is just playing acro and then doing discard stuff. And like if I'm doing this package, I'm pretty much infinite, and I have infinite block, or the enemy is dead. There's no beat of death, and you don't have to block that. So not having beat of death just like invalidates this sort of thing. If you just go infinite good enough, you just kill the enemy. So it just isn't needed. It's very much a win more card. And maybe does something if you literally see Pyramid from your ancient, but again, that's like a 1 in like 50 or something. I don't really know what the exact odds are, but it's not very good. Okay, Shadow Step. Discard your hand, next turn attacks deal double damage. So we decided to make Unload worse because now it doesn't do damage. So again, something you combo with cards, but if you have any experience with Unload and Slay the Spire 1, tossing your cards that you want to combo with Shadow Step the turn after that you were trying to hold on to with Retain, pretty awful. So this is just like really rough. I don't know when I ever want this thing. Walled Plains is like just one of the most disgusting things that you can do on this character. It's clicked on sight, lines up all your discard combos, and now suddenly I'm trying to throw that away to gamble on whether or not I can draw well next turn to actually get double damage instead of just drawing well and having good damage. It's just Unload plus Phantasmal Killer, which Phantasmal Killer is already kind of a bad card unless it comes exactly green and in Act 1. I just don't see why this is a thing. Like maybe it can play with reflex or something. Like it's just bad. Like we already know that Unload was bad with reflex in the previous game. Like we can cope and say that it does something. It just doesn't. There's just way better options. The fact that this thing is a rare is just really, really sad. And honestly, the the D tier being full of rares like this, part of it is that rares, again, I'm comparing to other rares a little bit, but a lot of these cards are just bad, and they're just outclassed by things above it. Like, I'm not even, like, factoring in the rare thing too much. Okay. Skewer, it's okay. It does damage. This is much less needed than in Slay the Spire 1. If you have a Chemex, sure. If you can enchant it, sure. But you have to pick it and then see those things really to want to have those things. So it ends up just being really awkward. Like, maybe you have a malaise and then you buy a Chemex and then this comes the floor after, and suddenly, like, all the stars align and it's going to perform. But for the most part, this thing is not really doing anything. There's just way better payoffs rather than paying into a dense card like this to do some damage, when I can just play Pinpoint, or I can play any of my slide payoffs like the Ricochet, Flicflack, or have Flechettes now that does, like, much better job than Skewer that I have to pump energy into. Again, energy in this game is at a premium. That's, like, one of the things that got harder to generate, and Skewer is better with energy. It's not it. Okay, Slice. In the previous game, this was a lot better. This was just sort of zero cost damage, and Slide didn't exist. So it's still going to go here just as a damage common that works with acro. But I do think that it's just not ideal to have to actually play the card instead of just being able to discard it. Like, having stuff trigger off of Slide when you discard it really is just having draw, because I don't need to discard other things that I then have to redraw into. So if I'm cycling cards with Sly or whatever, then I basically just, like, add one draw. So it's pretty nice, I think, to not have to play the card even though it costs 0. Like, Sly is stuff that costs 0, but you just don't have to redraw other crap. So it's kind of just not as good as it used to be. Slice used to be, like, a really solid damage common, but there's just other options now. If you don't have all the acro stuff, then Slice is, like, not even that great anyways. So really not something you actually want. Okay, Snakebite. We have reserved F tier for this card. What the hell were they thinking? I have no idea why this card exists. 2 energy for deadly poison that retains is just a completely absurdly bad card. This is, like, definitely the worst card in the game. Like, by a lot. I've never seen anything so bad in my entire life. This is, like, the most unpickable garbage I've ever seen. I can't even, like, completely explain how terrible this card is without going into every other card in every other class. Never pick this thing. I have no idea why this is in the game at all. It's just never getting in the deck. Okay, multiplayer card, not going to talk about it. I'll throw this over here. Storm of Steel, discard your hand, add 1 shiv into your hand for each discarded card. This is unchanged from Slay the Spire 1, and it was pretty terrible in Slay the Spire 1, and even worse now because you don't have shiv synergies that you actually want. So yeah, it's going straight into D tier somewhere. You don't even, like, have accuracy as often as you used to from Blade Dance, and can't even cope that it's, like, okay with the transform. The discard thing is completely fake. It ruins well-laid plans. It ruins retain. It's just not good. It's gross. Okay, Strangle. 1 energy, deal 8 damage whenever you play a card this turn. Enemy loses 2 HP. I think this is one of the better damage cards that you can see early on. That's just sort of like an uncommon common tier. It's not Sly payoff. So it's not that high. It doesn't really work with any of the shiv stuff. But as far as numbers are concerned, it's just like 12 damage or something. It's fine. Like, it's just a raw damage card alone. It's gonna do something, and the lose HP thing can get through shields for, like, the Eels of Doom. It's whatever. I don't really want to add this to the deck. It's really a desperation thing. It doesn't really work with anything else. It can do something with, like, a loop, like you play this and then play a bunch of draw cards, whatever, and go infinite. But, like, if you're doing that, again, there's just better payoffs. It's choke, but, like, choke is less needed in this game because you have better damage options, and Blade Dance is sucky. So I guess if you have Blade Dance in the deck and this comes forward too, and you're, like, running into a lead or something, and there's, like, a bunch of events, you have no more cards, like, sure, go ahead and pick it. But yeah, pretty firmly in C, I think. And I think what you'll notice is, like, the bottom tiers here are really populated by stuff, and the top tiers is, like, very obvious what's good and what's not. Like, the top cut of cards is just so much better and works so much better with the packages that are provided. than these that are kind of loosely supported. And that is, I think, the unfortunate thing about Slay the Spire 2 game design right now and balance, which I do have hope that the devs will be able to fix. I think it's like very obvious that they can fix those things and make the game feel more like Slay the Spire 1, where a lot of things are viable. But right now, it feels like the discard package is just so much clearly better than the other stuff. I think Blade Dance back to not exhausting would fix a lot of problems and make a lot of these other things actually pickable. But right now, it's going to be very polarized. Okay. Sucker Punch. Weak is weak. I can't in good conscience put this like lower than C tier, but it's not something I really want. It's 8 damage, so they did buff it from the previous game. So a tiny bit more damage, and weakness is good. Once again, there's other ways to actually apply weak. You start with neutralize in the starter deck, so automatically that makes that a little bit worse. Leg sweep is going to be your obviously like really premium thing. This is just common. I think there's less reasons why you need this in like endgame or something, but maybe a green one comes in Act 3 and you have no weakness for the boss gauntlet. Sure, sometimes. But for the most part, my decks have been really, really tiny, and I've been forcing like discard infinite stuff, and I just don't end up ever needing this thing. Okay. Suppress, innate, deal 11 damage, apply 3 weak. This is the neutralize upgrade. So this is ancient exclusive. Insane card. 3 weak is gross. Clearly this is just like an S tier card, right? It's just disgusting. Always applies weak on turn 1. The thing is, again, context is really important here. This is a boss relic. So you have to realize you're giving up potentially extremely strong things. As a standalone card, it is obviously S tier, but I think as a whole, it's probably not. It is obviously disgusting in the context of it's already in the deck, but the trade-off you're making for it, you're always giving up something else. If you see a bunch of garbage options and this is like your only one that you see, like you're probably not that unhappy about it. Like having weakness is really good, and you don't really need to have energy generation from your relics anymore with like the package that sort of is supported in this game now. Okay. Tactician. I think I'm going to put this at top of A. I don't think you need this to be S tier. It's a little harder to just pick. Having stuff be sly already cheats energy cost. So you need this less to actually perform a lot of the discard stuff than you do like something with reflex, right? Obviously, if you're doing infinite stuff, this is going to break the game very often. But it's not going to be the most important part of your engine. You need all the other stuff before you really want to pick this. I don't think on like floor 1 or something I'm raw picking a Tactician. Same thing with like reflex. I want the other stuff first, but the fact that prepared and acro are both at common means that this stuff gets in the deck pretty frequently. The nice thing about reflex over Tactician is that it works really well with prepared, and Tactician works better with acro. But I do think that reflex is just a stronger card by quite a bit, so there's definitely a distinction between these tiers here. Okay. The Hunt. 1 energy, deal 10. If fatal, gain an additional card reward, exhaust. I've only had this thing once. It's pretty clearly just going to be S tier. Think about how bad Busted Crown is and Slay the Spire 1, and just double your card rewards instead of like reducing them by 2. And you'll realize very quickly that, you know, that's pretty broken. This basically means that you can force the discard stuff way easier. The fact that, maybe I'll just throw this here, to be honest. The fact that one archetype and a certain subset of cards in the card pool is so much better than the other subset means that just seeing those cards is really important. If you get all the good cards, you just win the run, basically. The ways that you die in this game right now are you just don't see anything. And having 10 damage on a card is already a decent rate for a damage card. But the actual benefit of having extra card rewards, not just one extra card in the end of your card reward, but an entire separate screen of a second card you can take, means you can take combo pieces together. You just see the stuff more often. It's just a gross card. If your deck is already broken, you don't need this thing, but then you don't care about this anyways. Like, you don't care about anything on this list if your deck's already broken. This helps you get the broken stuff. And the fact that like it's so polarizing and the B tier up is so small compared to all the crap that's in these bottom tiers should just show you how important it is to actually find the good stuff. Okay, tools of trade, discard package, I'm in. pretty obviously a very, very good card. Draw consistency. A mid's not in the game anymore. Tools of the trade with a mid, not really needed. Tools of the trade without a mid, much better. Always triggers Sly, always triggers your reflex, lets you pick all those things. This is just an insane card. Upgrades to 0 energy in a game that, again, is very limited by energy cost. So, pretty sick. Okay. Tracking. Weak enemies take double damage from attacks. I do not remember what the upgrade is on this. I think it goes to 1 energy. But I'm not confident on that. Obviously, doubling your damage is pretty crazy. And not having to actually apply a debuff on the enemies is also really strong. However, I think if you are doing most of the stuff and finding these things of like acro and things like that, you don't really need to double your damage because you're just going infinite anyways. Not to say it's a bad card. It's obviously still very, very, very strong. Just double damage is a lot of output. It's like literally wrath. But the 2 energy cost does hurt it quite a bit. Needing an upgrade to actually play it very often hurts quite a bit. It's just a little bit clunky to put into play, which hurts it from being in here. If this costed 1 by default, it's obviously just going in ass. Neutralizes in the starter deck, gets upgraded very frequently. I think Silent more often than the other characters doesn't take damage in hallways. Like compared to Regen, where I walk into hallways and I just take damage all over the place, that just doesn't happen on Silent because you start out with Neutralize and Survivor in the base deck. Pretty similar to Slay the Spire 1. You just have defensive options, and most of the easy pools don't scale damage. It's pretty easy to just full block all of them. So you usually can afford more upgrades on Silent compared to the other characters. At least that's my experience so far. Again, not sure if that will change, but with 40 hours of game time or whatever, that's kind of how I felt so far. Okay. Untouchable. Sly gain 9 block. Yeah, this card's stupid. This is one of those discard payoffs that's just like why I don't need After Image anymore. I don't know if I should put it in S necessarily. It's maybe here, but it's a really, really crazy card. 9 is a crazy number to say 9 blocks 0. And even in the case that you have to play it for 2 energy, which is not that often, 9 for 2 is not a bad rate. So even in the low roll case, it still performs, even in the absolute brick case, right? And if like you're bricking because you walked into a fight like the I don't remember what it's called, but the guy that adds a bunch of statuses to your deck as an elite in Act 1, if you draw it alongside statuses, you can pay the energy for it. It's fine. Yeah, 2 for 9's not amazing, but it's a dense card and it's fine enough, especially for the fact that you're cheating it out most of the time. It's a pretty crazy card. Like it's just the floor and ceiling comparison is just so not comparable to other things. Like Deflect has nothing on this. And again, being able to discard this to play it instead of having to discard another card that you have to redraw is extremely significant. I cannot express how much you need to think about the redraw when you're playing Silence, and when you're drawing and shuffling your deck, how many cards you're drawing back through. That I think was one of the biggest things when I was first learning Silent in Spire 1, is how often you're drawing through crap to get to the good cards. Being able to discard this instead of discard another card to play like Deflect and then have to redraw both of those, I can just redraw straight back into Untouchable. It's disgusting. It's just +1 draw. Like, you may not read it like that, but that's really how it reads to me. Anytime you're interacting with a shuffle on this character, you just really think about what you're putting into your discard pile before you shuffle the deck again. That is like the biggest piece of advice I can give for Silent, is just really think about that interaction, especially with discard decks. It's extremely important to slow down and play good lines around the shuffle. Okay. Up my sleeve, add 3 shivs into your hand, reduce this card's cost by 1. This is one of the new cards. Kind of functions similarly to Blade Dance that eventually discounts down. For the first 2 plays, it is basically worse Blade Dance. Like, first play is just Blade Dance, but worse, cost 2. Second play is Blade Dance, and third play is better Blade Dance. So it is Blade Dance, but slow. I don't know why they thought Blade Dance was like too strong or something. This is like the card that transitions you into accuracy and some other things that actually synergize with shivs. But overall, I don't really find myself wanting this. you will pick it to kill bosses. Like, again, in long fights, it will do stuff. There's just better things to do. The rate's not that great. Like, 12 damage, unless you have some sort of synergies, not great. And how often are you going to even be picking accuracy in the first place? It's not just randomly going to be in your deck and this is going to spawn. You have to, like, pick this first and then pick accuracy, or you have to transform into one of them, and then you can wind up with this thing. But it's just awkward. It doesn't wind up in the deck as much as you probably want it to in order for it to be good, to work with all the other Shiv stuff. Like, this is the main problem with having combo archetypes all over the place in this game, but the individual pieces being bad is that you can never pick the first one to get into the archetype. You need the bridge card, and that's why Blade Dance being nerfed is such a huge hit to the whole Shiv package. You just cannot justify going into this and leaning into accuracy when this is what you'd have to pick first. Okay, yeah, it's just a cycling payoff. It exists, but it is very significantly worse than just cycling something like Pinpoint. Like, this card compared to this is just so much better. Like, this is so much work to do the thing that this does already. It's just not it. And it's way worse than the first cycle, obviously. Okay, well-laid plans. Okay, I'm kidding. That's clearly just one of the best cards in the game. Especially without the existence of Pyramid, you're not even really worried about getting Pyramid very often. Retain is just completely broken. Again, everything in this in-game now is just a combo thing. Everything works with another card, just lines up everything with the other thing. Obviously, Wraith form and Intangible in general is way less frequent in this game, but Well-Laid Plans is just gross card. If you're new to the game, maybe you don't understand how broken Retain is, just pick it. Think about what you're holding in your hand. You can hold Gamble, you can hold Acro to never brick the next turn. Like, it's just disgusting. Like, I don't need to say much more, I don't think. If you play with this, you will realize how stupid it is. Okay, Wraith form, final card. This is, again, ancient only. This is very clearly one of the best cards in the game. Getting 3 intangible on upgrade decks doesn't matter, because once, especially once you play this, you just get to exhaust your entire deck down to all the core pieces. You get to play all your powers for free, and then you just go in and do the infinite thing. You're not even blocking with decks. Dealing with Beat of Death is just not a problem anymore. Gross card. Obviously, you're trading a boss relic for it, or an ancient. I don't know what people want to call it now, but you're trading a very significant thing to get this card. Still, gross card. Intangible is extremely powerful, and most fights will just end before the downside is ever a thing. I'm just never worried about the decks down. If you are doing something like Untouchable and you run out of decks, but you're like slightly or pseudo infinite, Untouchable is still blocking 6 without an upgrade on it. And there's a lot of random things that just upgrade cards in your deck. So you still have block that you can get for whatever reason if you need it, and you're not just killing the enemies immediately. The downside is just not significant for basically making the enemies take 3 turns off. Obviously, upgrade this thing when you get it. It's definitely worth it. One of the few upgrades that will save a shit ton of HP. Very clearly super good, and gets out of the deck. It basically just exhausts and makes way for all of your discard synergies. Okay, so that is Silent for Spire 2, at least for day 4 thoughts. This is a little bit longer than the Regent video. I think I have more opinions on these cards just because Silent is a very similar framework from Slay Spire 1. So it's not entirely new as a character for me. But yeah, I will scroll through slowly just so people can take screenshots or whatever they want to do. And maybe some of this will change. I think most of this will change due to game balancing changes and not necessarily my opinions changing. I think I have a really good framework for what cards are going to be good on this character going forward already, just because of it existing in Spire 1. And I feel like I don't ever lose on this character unless I'm being incredibly stupid and just playing bad lines. It just feels extremely strong. So I think this whole like discard force infinite thing is just really imbalanced currently. The Sly cards are just a little too good. I wouldn't hate it being nerfed. I think Sly is a really fun mechanic. So I hope it doesn't become like completely unplayable or something, but it's just a little too powerful. They need to like trim the numbers on a lot of things. I think trimming numbers on like Pinpoint, on Untouchable, on I don't know, probably don't touch prepared and acro, but just make it harder to fully lean into this discard thing and just force it. I think making Blade Dance better, buffing some of the other stuff, nerfing the discard cards, making the payoffs a little bit worse means you can't just solely rely on this. Maybe you have to take poison to solve some of your bosses instead. Like, there needs to be a reason why I want to click other cards rather than just skipping everything the second I see a Flicflack and an acro, right? Like, that should not be enough. But, like, this number just doesn't look good enough. Unfortunately, it just kind of solos most of the game when you're just playing acro into this every turn, or prepared into this and sometimes playing it multiple times a turn. And yeah, there's no catalyst in Slay the Spire as well, as just got pointed out. I think part of it is because they don't want people just sitting around with Wraith form and Kata and just nightmaring it and just winning the fight immediately. They want people to actually have to play fights. That's why I think what they said is they were going to nerf infinites, but I think what they ended up doing is just enabling infinites with the card design and the enemy design and the ancient design. I think if ancients get changed, if the removes become less good, if the early game is more punishing, if the relics are cheaper and something you want to buy, so you end up with decks that have more cards in them. There's a lot of things that can change, not just surrounding card balance, but the environment that the game is in, that would change how the character is played. But right now, you're just not going to be punished for doing this. And that's about all it is. Okay, well, that's it for YouTube, I think. Thanks for everyone watching this live. I'm gonna definitely try to finish Regent, or not Regent, Necrobinder. That's kind of what I've been grinding today after putting in some hours on these characters. I'm gonna put like 15-20 hours in on Necro and get that uploaded as well. So thanks for watching. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.